Hello there, welcome back to buildqueue. This is going to be part 4 of our course. In part 3, we managed to build our application using command line, and in part 4, we're going to be building it using Jenkins. Now, before we put together our Jenkins file, the first thing that I want to do is I want to add some plugins to Jenkins. Now, you're going to open up your browser. Recall that we modified our host file in the beginning of this series, so I can actually reach my Jenkins service from my workstation just by using the URL that I put in. The URL that I put in was buildqueue.jenkins.com. So I press enter after I typed it out, and it brings me to my service. If Jenkins is installed on the same station as your workstation, then you can probably just reach this at localhost. And if you left your port at 8080, make sure that you specify port 8080. Back in part 1, we created our own user, so go ahead and log in with your information. After you type in your information, press enter. This will bring you to the dashboard. Select Manage Jenkins, select Plugins, select Available Plugins. The first one that I want to look up is Pipeline Stage View. Just type this into the search bar, select the checkbox next to it, and then select Install. And basically, whenever we have any jobs running, what this plugin is going to do is it's going to show them in a more eloquent way. It will have every stage separated out right from the job page. The next plugin that I want you to install, go ahead and install Hidden Parameter. Select the box next to it, select Install. Whenever you are setting up a configuration for your job, you're able to specify hidden parameters that won't show up whenever you select the Run Job button. It's going to be very useful for separating our builds. We want to use the same Jenkins file for all of our build platforms here. Using hidden parameters allows us to distinguish between them easily. Now, I really like to use this plugin whenever I'm configuring my build pipelines, but we're not going to really see the benefits of it until we add in our second build pipeline for another platform. So we'll wrap back around then. Just a little bit of a spoiler, I guess, for the future. We are going to be putting all of our build platforms on the same Jenkins file, but we're going to have multiple build pipelines. Each of them will be centralized around one build platform, and this plugin will help us a lot with that. This last one may already be installed, so go ahead and check on installed plugins. Make sure that we have Pipeline Groovy and Pipeline Groovy libraries installed. Now, whenever you have installed your plugins, you want to select Dashboard to get back to the dashboard. Let's go ahead and create the job that's going to be responsible for our Windows Unity build pipeline. Select New Item in the upper left-hand corner. I'm naming this one Windows Unity Project. Select an item type, you want to select Pipeline, and then select OK. For the description of this, I put this job will create a Windows build from our Unity project. You want to go ahead and select this project as parameterized. We'll add those a little bit later on. While we're going through this course, it's going to be easier for us to just manually trigger our builds. We're not going to set up any build triggers for now. If you come down to pipeline, change this to pipeline from SCM. The reason why I want to use this is because I want to see whenever we make changes to our build pipeline, it is always better to have that history. So what this is going to do is this is going to find the Jenkins file on our GitLab repository, and it's going to import that file and run the contents of it. If you come over here to SCM, we're going to be using Git, and we're going to need to fill out a few things. We need our GitLab repository URL, and then we're going to need a way to authenticate against it. We are going to need to add our credentials to our credentials manager here on Jenkins. But first, let's go ahead and set up a personal access token over on GitLab, and let's go ahead and get the URL for our GitLab repository. But before we do that, Jenkins likes to time out, so go ahead and save this for now. We'll edit it again in a minute. Open up a new tab, search gitlab.com, go ahead and sign in to your GitLab account. After you've signed in, go ahead and open up your project. At the top, you're going to want to go ahead and copy your URL, navigate back over to Jenkins, select configure for this job, and go ahead and paste in your repository URL and then save it again. Now let's go ahead and create a personal access token here on GitLab. Select your icon, select preferences, select access tokens, select add new token, name your access token however you want to, and then set the expiration date. If you don't want an expiration date, you can clear this field out. Just to be safe, I'll typically use read API and read repository. That should be good enough. Select create personal access token. Now make sure that you copy your personal access token and you have it somewhere on hand. You're not going to be able to see this token again. If you lose it, you'll have to delete it and create a new one. Now we want this to be accessible by Jenkins, so let's go ahead and copy the token name real quick, navigate back over to Jenkins, select the dashboard, select manage Jenkins, select credentials, select global, select add credentials, username with password is fine, paste in your username. I also paste this into ID, and we need to paste in the password. If it's still open, navigate back over to Gitlab, copy your personal access token, navigate back to Jenkins, paste this inside of password, add a description. My description just says credentials for the buildqueue user on Gitlab, select create, select dashboard, select Windows Unity project, select configure again, back at the pipeline script from SEM section, go to credentials, select the credentials that you just added, and it seems like we've run into a little bit of an issue. It says failed to connect to repository, error performing git command. So I think that whenever we install git on our Jenkins server, it probably didn't set the path variable. So you probably need to go back and do that, or you can actually do that through Jenkins itself. So if you run into this issue, go ahead and do what I'm about to do. Navigate back to the dashboard, select manage Jenkins, go over to tools, and yes, here's the culprit. Yeah, this path is not set, so let's go ahead and set that. Okay, so I want to go and find my git executable. I have connected to my Jenkins server with remote desktop again, and I found that my git executable is located at C, program files, git, bin. Here's the git executable. So I'm going to copy this path here. I'm going to minimize this. At the very beginning of this path, I'm going to paste it in, add a backslash, wait for a few seconds, and the error goes away. So now I'm going to go ahead and save. After it is saved, go to dashboard, go to Windows Unity project, go to configure, and the error is gone. Our git is working again. I was thinking about cutting that out, but I think leaving mistakes in while I'm recording this series is probably going to be a good thing. It'll help you guys make corrective actions whenever things inevitably go wrong. So continuing on, I went ahead and updated the branch specifier here. This is going to be the branch that it's going to pull your Jenkins file from. So I just set it to dev instead of master. The last thing that I'm going to do here is I'm going to change one thing here with the script path. I'm going to change it from just Jenkinsfile to Jenkinsfile.groovy. It'll make it a little bit easier to use within my editors if it detects that it's a groovy script. After updating the script path, let's go ahead and select save. Okay, so now Jenkins is going to be able to fetch our build script from Gitlab. Okay, it's time to build our Jenkins file now. So in File Explorer, go ahead and open up your project. The root is fine. It doesn't have to be nested within the Unity project itself. Right click in the directory, select new. Just go ahead and create a text document, name it the exact same name that we named it on the job configuration, Jenkinsfile.groovy. If a rename pop-up comes up, select yes. Okay, and our Jenkins file has been created. Whenever I'm modifying or creating groovy scripts, I typically like to use VSCode versus Visual Studio. So I would just right click, open this with code. If you want to use the same IDE, open up a new tab, type in download VS Code, open up their website. I'm personally using Windows, so I'll use the Windows installer, and then I'll just follow the prompts on the Windows installer. I have VS Code open, and the first thing that I want to do is I want to go to the left-hand side, open up extensions, type in Groovy, and then go ahead and install this extension here. It's called Code Groovy. It's just Groovy support for VS Code. Select install. After it's installed, you can go ahead and close out of this tab, navigate back to your Jenkinsfile.groovy. You can go ahead and minimize the extensions here too. Now let's go ahead and add the essentials. Go ahead and add pipeline. This is where we're going to store most of our logic in. Inside of pipeline, go ahead and add an environment section. After environment, go ahead and add an agent section. And then after agent, go ahead and add your stages section. So the very first area that we want to start fleshing out is the agent. We want to go ahead and start defining our workspace that we are going to be running our jobs in. So inside of agent, you are going to create a label section, and then inside the label section at the top, there's the label field here. If you want to run this job on a specific agent that you have connected to your Jenkins service, then you can specify that here. We're using the default built-in node, so instead we are going to just define a custom workspace here. Just a disclaimer, it's not generally recommended that you use the default node for running your jobs, but for the sake of this course, it'll be just fine. To define what our custom workspace is going to be, we are actually going to pass in a variable here. So outside of our pipeline area at the very top, I defined two different variables. I've defined project name, and then I've defined custom workspace. Just in case we decide to use project name in different parts of our build pipeline, I left it separate. The custom workspace, this is where our job is going to keep our repository as it runs each job. So this is going to be set at C, Jenkins, Unity project, and then whatever our project name is going to be. And you may be wondering why we have two backslashes here. Well, whenever you're using Groovy scripts and just Jenkins in general, one backslash is typically used as an escape character, so you have to use two of them in most cases. Sometimes you have to use even more. I'm sure that we've all experienced headaches with escape characters. The next thing that I want to do is I want to go ahead and set up an environment variable for the project path. So the project path is going to be set equal to the custom workspace that's defined up above. And the reason why we are setting this here, just in case it seems redundant, is this will be more easily accessible by our stages. So that configures our workspace and also sets some environment variables. So the next thing is we need to go ahead and add our stages. The stages that we are ultimately going to have for the Windows build going to be build Windows, and then we want to deploy Windows. It doesn't really get all too much more complicated than that. In the build Windows stage, we are basically going to run the exact same command that we ran in the previous video, but in a much more clean kind of way and modular. I want all these important stages to be controlled by parameters, so that's why I put the parameters in here. Build Windows for build Windows stage, and then for the deploy Windows stage I put deploy Windows. So where do these variables ultimately need to live and where are they controlled from? Well, that's going to be on the Jenkins side. So you want to open up your browser again, you want to find your job, you want to go ahead and configure it. Again, make sure that this project is parameterized. Add a parameter. These are just going to be Boolean parameters, so select Boolean. The first one is called build Windows. We don't necessarily need a description in here. At the bottom, select add parameter, another Boolean parameter, type in deploy Windows. Back up on build Windows, I am going to set this true by default, and deploy we're going to leave false for now. Since we're not setting up Nexus in this video, we're not going to do too much with the deployment right now. For now, we're just going to worry about building, and then you are going to select save. And if you want to see what this looks like whenever you press build with parameters, just select it, don't build right now, and we can toggle these on or off. And if you come back to Visual Code, whenever build Windows is true, it will perform the stage, otherwise it's going to skip it. And the same for the deploy Windows. Since this is going to be false, it's not actually going to run the stage, it's going to skip right over it. Now let's go ahead and expand upon the build Windows section. So below where we check the build parameters, we're going to add in our steps. So go ahead and add a section for steps. Inside of steps, go ahead and add another section for script. Within our script section, the next thing that we want to do is we want to actually specify some more environment variables. This environment variable is going to be called Unity path, and we need to feed in our Unity installation directory on our Jenkins server. So at the very top, I went ahead and defined another variable. I need to find out where my Unity editor is installed on my Jenkins server. In order to find out where my Unity editor is installed, I went ahead and swapped back over to my Jenkins server. I opened up Unity Hub, and this is the location. If you go under installs, and it will show you your Unity versions that you have installed. So I'm going to highlight this, Control C to copy, come back up here, open up VS Code again, find Unity installation variable, and you're going to want to paste that in. And again, escape characters, go ahead and double each of these backslashes. There, that's much better. I'm also going to remove this here at the end, the unity.exe, because later on we may need to use Unity installation here for something else. So it's good to go ahead and have this as its own variable. If you want to make this just slightly more modular, you can create another variable here above this one called Unity version. You can add your Unity version in here, and then you'll take the area where this is and you can replace it with this Unity version, and it will grab the Unity version here. This will make it a lot more portable whenever you create multiple build pipelines for different projects that use different editor versions. And again, we basically are going to do the same thing that we did at the end of the previous video. So we want to run the same command, but we also want to inject the variables that we have just created. So how are we going to do that? we are going to type in bat, type in 3 apostrophes, press space 2 times, and then write 3 more apostrophes. And from within this block here, we can run some commands. The very first part of the command that we want to run is we want to reference our environment variable for the Unity path, and then we are going to use /unity.exe. And I know this may seem a little confusing because in our Unity installation variable, we're using backslash, but the direction of the slashes doesn't necessarily matter for this part all too much. And whenever we're defining this within the context of this bat block, we don't have to constantly specify multiple slashes. The next thing that we want to do is we want to type in -quit space batch mode space project path. We already have an environment variable set for our project path, and just in case it isn't completely clear quite yet, if we want to reference environment variables from this bat block, we put the variable name inside of 2 percentage signs. And I just noticed that our project path isn't actually pointing to our project, it's pointing to the root of the repository. So go back up to pipeline environment, find your project path variable here. We are going to type in //, and then we are going to put a reference to our project name variable that we have set up at the top. After we've made changes to that environment variable, the next thing we want to do is we want to go back to our bat block here, and at the very end we want to type in another space -execute method, and then we are going to call on the method that exists within our build script that we created in the previous video, and that was build script build windows. So go ahead and type that in, and we want Jenkins to properly track the log, so type in space -log file and then space dash. So this is basically a one-to-one implementation with what we had back in part 3. So I guess the next thing that we need to do is we need to push our work up to our repository, and then we need to test it. And I already know that with how I have the deploy windows section set up, Jenkins is going to throw an error. So I went ahead and filled out just a little bit. I just made it to where it echoes deploy windows. We're not going to really worry about fleshing this part out right now, but this will be some good placeholder for now. After you've saved your changes, you want to open up your project again within File Explorer. You're going to right click, git bash here, type in git stage dot git commit -m. This adds my Jenkins file to the repository for my commit message, and then finish everything off with git push. I've already preemptively done this, so I didn't actually just run those commands. Now let's go ahead and test everything out since everything's been pushed to the repository. So you're going to want to return back to Jenkins. You're going to select build with parameters, leave build windows checked, leave deploy windows unchecked, select build, and it'll probably take a little bit to build, so just be patient. If you want to monitor this while it's building, go ahead and select the job here, select console output, and now just wait and see what happens. And after waiting for about 4 minutes, it seems like everything has successfully built, which is great. And builds after this won't take 4 minutes, it just had to do a import on the Unity side, so that's why it takes a while the first time. Other builds after this will be a little bit faster. So what I'm going to do to verify that everything has worked here, I'm going to remote into my Jenkins server once again. I'm going to go to my C drive on the Jenkins server, select Jenkins. I'm going to go to my custom path. So Unity projects, Jenkins Unity test, Jenkins Unity test again. We can see that there's a builds folder in here, and it has our builds in here. So everything has been built out successfully. You may be asking, what is all this? Why am I coming in here, logging into my Jenkins server to verify that these builds are here? Well, since we haven't really deployed anything quite yet, this is the only way that we can really verify things. So what I'm going to do, actually, this is going to be completely optional. If you're following along with the course, you don't necessarily have to go through with this part, but I want to be able to retrieve these from Jenkins itself temporarily. I'm going to make a change to my Jenkins file real quick. You do not have to make this change, but if you want to store your artifacts on Jenkins itself within your jobs, you can do so. So I'm back over on VS Code, and after my stages are all done running, I went ahead and added a post section here. And what's going to happen here is after the build's done, it's going to archive these artifacts, and it's going to pull the artifacts that are in project name / builds, and then any contents that are located in there. And again, the project name specified here at the top, it's Jenkins Unity test. So I'm going to push this up, and then I'm going to test it. Again, you don't necessarily have to do this. I'm more just doing this just to show you in case you want to store your artifacts on Jenkins. So I will see you over on the Jenkins side after I push everything. So now that everything is pushed, I am going to go ahead and run this build again. So I am going to build with parameters, build windows, and I went ahead and ran a build before this. And as you can see, the time went down to 32 seconds to build it. So that's nice. That's definitely an improvement over the 4 minutes. Update, I made a mistake once again. If you see the log here, it didn't add in my /. Apparently that was also just an escape character. So I went back to my script and I added one more / after project name, and then everything worked. As I said, escape characters, everyone has nightmares with them. So whenever I ran it again after I made the update, it was a success. It archived the artifacts. Now if you see next to this job number 4, there's this little blue icon and there's this long list of items. This is basically every single file that exists within the builds directory. It probably would have been better if I just said windows.zip instead of all contents, but now I can take anything that I want from here and just download it, keep, and now I have access to those artifacts. Just to get back to the state that I was in earlier, I went ahead and removed my post block here because I want to be able to publish to an artifact repository later on, so I don't want to store my artifacts on Jenkins and just have it taking up a lot of extra space. I went ahead and pushed those changes to my repository too. So that will conclude part 4. I know that it was a rather long one. We had to do a lot of different things on Jenkins, and we also made mistakes along the way, but we also corrected those mistakes. It's all a part of the learning experience. Ultimately, we're able to build our Unity project with Jenkins. So the next thing that we're going to be doing is we are going to be migrating away from the building aspect, and we are going to try to deploy to an artifact repository. We will be getting set up with Nexus. We will be configuring Nexus, and then we will be updating our build pipeline once again so that we can deploy to Nexus. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you in part 5.